Boris Karloff first appears as the monster in Frankenstein. Those sunken eyes, that bone-chilling growl, those bolts in the neck, it's the stuff of nightmares. And so it's only fitting that the original idea for Frankenstein came from a dream, a nightmare that occurred on a dark and stormy night almost 200 years ago in the mind of an 18-year-old girl named Mary Shelley. And like so many dreams, this one also has its roots in reality. Join us as Biography presents the true story of Frankenstein.
Welcome home, Mr. Karloff.
Thank you very much. It has been a most exciting return for me, really, because I was just in time for that glorious 5th day of the second test.
Oh, it was a day, wasn't it? I was there too, yeah.
I've just come straight from the Oval.
Oh, yeah? What's happening there?
Well, you know that Frankenstein monster? He's hung round my neck just like an albatross.
Yes?
All the same, I am grateful to him because he started me on the road to success. And that was in Hollywood, you know.
Yeah?
1931. Rather a long time ago.
Frankenstein's heart, Lieutenant. Frankenstein is still living. It can never die. Never. Frankenstein's story.
As grisly a story of science gone wrong as was ever put on the screen. In 1818, the immortal book about a man who made a monster was born in the young female brain of one Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley.
I had a dream tonight of the dead being alive, which has affected my spirits.
Did I request thee, Maker, from my clay to mold me man? Did I solicit thee from darkness to promote me?
It's the best novel ever written by a teenager, you realize. She was 18 when she wrote it. But this is one of the difficulties in dealing, and not so much with the story as with the novel itself, that it's very hard to separate Frankenstein from the biography of Mary Shelley.
She eloped with Shelley in 1814. In 1815, in February 1815, she had a child by him, a daughter that was born prematurely when it was 7 months old. That child died within a few weeks. Shelley was already married. His first wife, Harriet, was to commit suicide late in 1816, within 2 months of the suicide of Mary's half-sister, Fanny. So it's hardly surprising that Frankenstein is so preoccupied with the extremes of birth and death. But she was pregnant again while these things were going on. And what they did was to reawaken her sense of guilt that she'd had all her life, which had come from her mother's death. Mary Wollstonecraft died a few days after giving Mary Shelley birth. And I think the sense of guilt and responsibility for that death never left Mary Shelley. There's a sense in which she feels she's a bringer of death, that she's, instead of bringing life into the world, she's actually brought death into the world in a very literal sense. She brought death into the world by being born. So the fact that she's created a monster who also brings death into the world is a clear parallel, you know, with her own psychic life.
In the summer of 1816, Shelley and I visited Switzerland and became the neighbours of Lord Byron. Incessant rains confined us to the house for days. Lord Byron suggested we each write a ghost story, and his proposition was acceded to.
You hear? Come, Mary. Come and watch the storm.
You know how lightning alarms me. Shelley, darling, will you please light these candles for me?
Oh, Mary, darling. Astonishing creature.
I, Lord Byron.
Frightened of thunder, fearful of the dark, and yet you have written a tale that sent my blood into icy creeps. Look at her, Shelley. Can you believe that bland and lovely brow conceived of Frankenstein? No wonder Murray's refused to publish the book. He says his reading public would be too shocked.
It will be published, I think.
Then, darling, you will have much to answer for.
We're all standing on Mary Shelley's shoulders. I mean, if we seem tall and marvelous, it's only because this woman was a talented and modest genius in her own right.
One night, we discussed the nature of the principle of life and whether it might ever be discovered and communicated. Perhaps a corpse could be reanimated. Perhaps a creature might be manufactured and endued with vital warmth. Night waned upon our talk, and even the witching hour had passed before we retired to rest. Images arose in my mind with a vividness far beyond the usual bounds of reverie. My imagination, unbidden, possessed and guided me.
The enticements of science can be imagined only by those who have experienced them. In other studies, you can go as far as others have gone before you, but in science, there is continual food for discovery and wonder. I was acquainted with the study of anatomy, but this was not sufficient. Life was the secret which I desired to define. To examine the cause of life, we must first have recourse to death. A churchyard, to me, was merely the receptacle of bodies deprived of life.
A Dr. Barnard before his time. He was a man who was trying to do the impossible, and that was create a living, which he succeeded in doing.
Biography will continue in a moment here on A&E.
Dr. Coburn, how are you so interested in this gentleman?
I'm in search of knowledge.
Oh, knowledge? Ah, so that's it.
The great claim you must make for Frankenstein, that it came at a particular moment in the history of England, in the history of the West, if you like. This is not a kind of Faust legend where, with some kind of superstitious mumbo-jumbo, life is created or a demon is called forth. This is the rejection of all that, and this is man taking the power of life and death into his own hands.
He personified exactly the kind of atomic age inventor who really never worried about what effect his discoveries were going to have, but on the contrary felt that they were their own justification. And if they worked, that was fine. Then he had succeeded in what he'd set out to do. Never mind if what their effect was. If it was destructive, well, that was part of their nature. And indeed, it was part of his.
From that fateful day when stinking bits of slime first crawled from the sea and shouted to the cold stars, I am man. Our greatest dread has always been the knowledge of our own mortality. But tonight, we shall hurl the gauntlet of science into the frightful face of death itself. Tonight, we shall ascend into the heavens. We shall mock the earthquake.
Victor Frankenstein is an atheist, and he more or less takes over the role of God. I mean, this is why we regard him as the archetypal scientist, that he is largely fulfilling the creator's role, and this is our perception of the scientist today. And this is why it is the great founding book of modern science fiction. The book has never been out of print. No one has ceased making the films since the very first one, and there's much more serious attention given it today than ever before, because we are increasingly preempting these powers.
A new species would bless me as its creator. Many happy and excellent natures would owe their being to me. No father could claim the gratitude of his child so completely as I.
Sit down. Sit down.
I was the misshapen creature in those Depression days of 1931. People queued up at box offices all over the country, breaking records. And afterwards, it was evident that millions all over the world felt sympathy for the monster. It was clear from the letters they sent that while they were terrified by my characterization, at the same time they pitied the monster that I portrayed. And that pleased me because it was exactly what I had hoped.
It's amazing that anybody would read that book and say, this is a movie. I mean, there simply is not a movie in that book when you read it. So someone must have been a genius back then to put together James Whale, a script writer, and Boris Karloff. So, I mean, mythic, silly Hollywood Tinseltown sometimes can be very profoundly creative and joining some previously creative thing and making a wonderful work that lasts forever.
The very first screen Frankenstein was made in 1910 for the Edison Company. The film hasn't been seen for 50 years. It was directed by a man called J. Searle Dawley, who went on to create various other classics like The First Charge of the Light Brigade. It was a film which was missing for many years. It only relatively recently reappeared. All the history books will tell you that it doesn't exist anymore, but that's not true. In good classic style, a copy did survive in somebody's attic over in Midwest. In creating the monster, which he did by a quite ingenious piece of film reversal, so that having burnt a monster, he then reversed the film and the monster appears from the ashes. He discovered the key factor, that the whole technical process of creating this thing, whatever it is so visually exciting in its own right that an audience will quite happily sit and watch that for its own sake. There are no technical details in Mary Shelley's original. There is no way of working out, indeed no way that she could tell us, obviously enough, how this monstrous act was performed. All she can concern herself with are the consequences. But on screen, there are all sorts of ways to show how it can be performed, very visual ways, so that the larger the set, the larger the equipment, the more massive the material that's used to present the context for this tremendous experiment, the happier the audience is.
How do you do? I'm Victor Frankenstein.
It's been the big distraction, and the problem with that distraction has been that people have got their own idea of what a Frankenstein story should be. so that the monster has become the star, the makeup, the special effects have become the things that matter, and the story itself, although it carries a certain visceral charge, is still not as important as the things that sell the movie.
Biography will continue in a moment here on A&E.
No one should temper with the laws of God.
Frankenstein. As I think, you will think. We are one. I will command. You will obey. I created you. I command you to get up. Get up, Igor.
A lot of film versions have reworked it to very different ends from those that Mary Shelley had in mind, and there is no film that has been produced that is absolutely true to the novel. Frankenstein is a text that is a very telling indictment of the consequences of men taking over reproduction or trying to write out women from creativity, whether it be artistic creativity or creation of life.
For crying out loud. Will you stop it?
Little.
I think I am.
Look, you agreed to park here with me.
My shoe.
But deliberately taunting me.
Too bad.
I ought to kill you.
Don't come any closer. Leave me alone.
Where can we get the brain? I need a brain. I need a brain.
I mean, it's ironic, really, that Mary Shelley's fable, the fable by a woman, which has very peculiar resonances for women, should have been taken over by a male film industry and turned into the opposite of itself. It's almost an allegory in itself.
Father and grandfather never used a female brain. No. But now we're aware that the female brain is conditioned to a man's world. Therefore takes orders where the other ones didn't. Are you sure? I'm sure of one thing. You better hurry before the brain cells are damaged completely. Frankenstein's daughter. Frankenstein's daughter.
I saw the pale student of unhallowed arts standing beside the thing he had created. my hideous phantom haunted me, and so possessed my mind that a thrill of fear ran through me. Swift as light was the idea that broke in upon me. I need only describe the spectre which haunted my midnight pillow. On the morrow, I announced that I had thought of a story.
For years after I saw Frankenstein, literally years, I would have a dream where I'd be sleeping on my fire escape, because in Brooklyn, it was too hot. We had no air conditioning, there was no such thing. And I would sleep on the fire escape. And I would have dreams. I guess I was afraid of falling, but my dreams would take that Frankenstein was... for some reason, we called the monster Frankenstein, even though it was Dr. Frankenstein. I think we all made that mistake. The monster was Frankenstein. And it was only when we learned that there was a Dr. Frankenstein and there was the monster that we... But anyway, I always thought that Frankenstein, the monster, and when I was 5 years old, was coming to get me. And I would hear him clambering up the metal fire escape. I could hear those sounds, the ringing of the metal, and he was getting closer and closer, and I would scream, don't let him get me. And my mother would wake me up and say, nobody's going to get you. And I'd say, Frankenstein, didn't you see him? She'd say, who? I'd say, the knobs, I can't take those knobs, those things that came out of his neck. My mother said to my brother Irving, the knobs. Why does he keep talking about the knobs all the time? She didn't know what I meant by knobs. To this day, she don't know what I mean by knobs. Anyway, but it had such a profound emotional effect on me that when we were going to do it, I knew I did it. Part of it was a catharsis for me to make it funny so I would never have those terrible dreams about it being so real, about monsters killing us and taking us away.
Nothing.
Oh, Doctor, I'm sorry.
No. Be of good cheer. If science teaches us anything, it teaches us to accept our failures as well as our successes with quiet, dignity, and grace.
Son of a bitch bastard, I'll get you for this! What did you do to me? What did you do to me? Stop it! You kill him! I don't want to live! I do not want to live!
By the time one reaches the Mel Brooks version of Frankenstein, it is possible to take this myth, as it's now become, a myth to which we are all heir, which we all know extremely well. It's part of our growing up, as it were, and to poke fun at it in a way that does actually enhance one's understanding of the story.
Although Mel Brooks created a comic version of Frankenstein, others can exploit the theme of science gone mad by creating their own Frankenstein's monster. A look at one such monster, the Terminator, when biography continues.
Frankenstein films, you could argue, are films not in which Frankenstein appears or his creature, but on the contrary, films in which science is pushed to its ultimate objective, which is the postponement, maybe even the defeat of death. And that defeat of death is achieved by all sorts of mechanical means, and therefore the robot becomes the creature.
It is with difficulty that I remember the early days of my being. All the events of that period appear confused and indistinct. It was a long time before I learned to distinguish between my different senses. I hid, first of all, in the forest. I had to learn about the passing of day into night, about hunger and cold and fire. I made noises to imitate the songs of birds, but the sounds which broke from me frightened me into silence. I spied on people and felt both pain and pleasure as I watched. I longed to discover the motives and feelings of these lovely creatures. When they were unhappy, I was filled with sorrow. When they rejoiced, I shared their joy. I learnt their customs and their language, but dared not show myself. I formed in my imagination 1,000 pictures of presenting myself to them, but to no avail. But what was I? Endued with a body so hideously deformed and loathsome. Was I then a blot upon the earth whom all men disowned? No father had watched my infant days. No mother had caressed me. Cursed Creator, why did I live? All mankind was at peace and enjoyment save I. I, like the arch-fiend, bore a hell within me and wished to spread destruction around me and then to have sat down and enjoyed the ruin.
I don't think the novel would be half the novel it is if we weren't made to feel great compassion for this outrageous vagabond, this exile from society, living in the heart of the book, the creature itself. Victor Frankenstein is pale compared with the passions and the miseries of the creature. There is this high charge in the monster, I think, of its feeling of isolation. With the situation of Mary Shelley herself, whose mother died when Mary was born, and whose father was always cold and distant. Although I think there's no doubt that he loved Mary, he had a lot of other preoccupations. And she says once somewhere, he never caressed me.
At the very centre of the story is a fable about a creature who has no mother. He has a father but no mother, just as Mary Shelley felt she had a father but no mother. It is preoccupied with finding that lost parent, and there's a kind of interesting slippage in the story, really, between whether that source will be found in a mother or a god. There's a kind of desire for God and a desire for a mother at the same time.
I set off to find my Creator. On him only had I any claim for pity and justice. An idea seized me. If I could educate this little creature as my companion and friend, I should not be so desolate in the peopled earth.
Let me go! Let me go! My father's was Sir Frankenstein the magistrate.
Frankenstein?
My heart swelled with triumph. I too could create desolation. My enemy was not invulnerable. This death and 1,000 other miseries should torment and destroy him.
The curious thing about the original novel and the way it's become distorted by film is that having discovered these two visual excitements in the story, that's to say the creation of the creature and then the appearance of the creature, the cinema has never wanted to explore the character of the creature in the way that Mary Shelley does. In the films, the creature was inarticulate. It was unable to produce anything other than animal sound, which meant clearly that it would behave in a totally different way from the very lucid and intelligent behavior of the creature in the novel. And these are things which destroy, really, the basic purpose of the monster as I understand Mary Shelley to have presented it, which was one of equal debate between creator and created.
For 2 years, I had waited for the sole purpose of infusing life into an inanimate body. Yet now, the dream had vanished, and breathless horror filled my heart. I hoped that left to itself, the spark of life would fade. I hoped the grave would quench the fleeting existence of my creature, a hideous corpse I had regarded as the cradle of life.
In Frankenstein, man not only aspires to be God, but he also aspires to be woman. He tries to be God as the creator of life, and he tries to be woman as the reproducer of life. And he usurps both roles. And in that sense, it's a myth that is showing the consequences of making something natural unnatural, of taking on the roles of God and woman. In other words, of inhabiting a world which seems to have been deprived of a divine creator. And in fact, the monster's very desperate reproaches to Frankenstein for having made him, obviously they pick up and rework Paradise Lost and Adam's reproaches to God. And in that sense, they are very anguished pleas on the part of man, if you like, on the part of mankind, to a universe that seems to have lost its meaning.
Frankenstein.
Do you dare approach me? I cannot bear the sight of your detested form.
I expected this from you. All men hate the wretched.
One of your victims. Are they less wretched than yourself? You hideous monster. I will extinguish that spark of life I gave you.
Come and hear me out before you try your strength with me. You accuse me of murder, yet you would destroy your own creation. How dare you sport with life?
Cursed be the day you first saw light. Cursed be these hands that gave you life.
You are my creator. I should be your Adam. But I am the fallen angel, unjustly banished from paradise.
The fires of hell are too mild a vengeance for your crimes.
Biography will continue in a moment here on A&E.
What do you want of me?
You must create a companion for me. A creature of another sex, as hideous as myself. My evil passion will leave me, for I will meet with love,
As I proceeded in my labor, it became every day more horrible and irksome to me. I went to it in cold blood, and my heart sickened at the work of my hands. I began to consider for the first time the effects of what I was now doing. I was about to create a being of whose dispositions I was wholly ignorant. She might become 10,000 times more evil than her mate.
Scientists were shaken by their success.
My own feeling, I can see now that it's rather superficial. Feeling was, what have we done?
But Oppenheimer knew.
And I remembered the line from the Bhagavad Gita. I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. Some doubts as to my fitness for getting it done made me worried. Also, I had then, as I've had throughout this whole thing, I'm not completely free of a sense of guilt.
I have traversed a vast portion of the earth. How I have survived, I hardly know. I cannot die and leave my persecutor alive. All my speculations and hopes are as nothing. And like the archangel who aspired to omnipotence, I am chained in an eternal hell. The creature has snatched from me every hope of future happiness. Those I love are dead. I was left to live. Seek happiness. Seek happiness. Seek happiness in tranquility. Avoid ambition, even the innocent one of scientific discovery. Yet why do I say this? I have myself been blasted in these hopes. But another may succeed.
Frankenstein, why do I now ask pardon of you? I have murdered the lovely and helpless. Evil has been my goal. But I shall no longer be the instrument of misery. The wretched pattern of my life is complete. I shall collect a funeral pyre, and it will consume my miserable body to ashes. Feeling and sense will pass away. Thus in my death shall I find happiness. Farewell.
I will pioneer a new way, explore unknown powers, and unfold to the world the deepest mysteries of creation.
Did I request thee, Maker, from my clay to mold me man? Did I solicit thee from darkness to promote me?
I had a dream tonight of the dead being alive, which has affected my spirits.
With the advances being made today in genetic engineering and DNA research, the power to create life, a power that once was the exclusive province of nature, may someday be within our reach. The moral questions that confronted the fictional Dr. Frankenstein almost 200 years ago are the same ones that face today's scientists. And so the story of Frankenstein continues to haunt us, not only because of the chills and thrills, but because of its timeliness. And now, let's see what's coming up on our next biography.
Whoever's like